Thank you for your patience, everyone. Sorry for the late start. We ran into some tech issues on my end, but I appreciate you joining us tonight for part one of our Michener Monday webinar series for medical laboratory science. We will be hearing from a current student and a recent alum to talk about the program and their experience. We're really lucky to be able to hear what they have to say and share all the inside tips about what you need to know about MedLab. So a fun fact about MedLab, this was our very first program at Michener. So this is the program that started it all. And is still going strong to this day. So we'll start. Please note that this is being recorded, and any questions you may have, please leave them closer to the end after our student and alum have spoken, and we'll try to answer as much as we can. So thank you for joining us this evening. So we would like to acknowledge the sacred land where we are today, which has been and continues to be the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River, among many other unnamed and unrecognized Indigenous communities. At this location, we stand on land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We recognize this agreement not as a thing of the past, but as a promise today and into the future. We must share the responsibility of ensuring that the dish is never empty by taking care of the land and the creatures we share it with and transforming our personal and institutional relationships. This meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn on this land. We urge you as future Canadian healthcare practitioners and leaders to acknowledge that it is our collective responsibility to strengthen our ties within the communities we serve and practice healthcare in a way that advances the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 7 health-related recommendations and practice your profession in that spirit. So medical laboratory science is a 3-year program at Michener, and it's 6 semesters. So when you graduate and get licensed as an MLT, you would be working as a medical laboratory scientist, where you would perform laboratory tests and work with the healthcare team. And we will hear more about how the program works and what you do in the field. So Georgia Gassetti is in 2nd year of MedLab. She'll graduate in 2026. We're so happy to have you here, Georgia. She's also one of our student ambassadors. So without further ado, let's hear about what 2nd year is like.
Hello, everyone. I'm Georgia. I hope you're all doing well. And if I were to describe what our typical schedule looks like, it varies from week to week. So we have basically like a hybrid schedule where bi-weekly we're in person for labs, and then the next week we are online for our lectures. So for example, last week, I had a full online week. So every day we would have lectures followed by an online lab. And sometimes these labs are marked, or they might just be a practice lab, and you get to, it's basically on Zoom and you interact with the prof and listen to lecture like usual. And then from what you learn on your online weeks, you apply to the next week during your in-person labs. So for this coming week, so for me, Wednesday to Friday, I have in-person labs, and that's where we really get to practice our hands-on skills and apply what we learned the week before online to in-person during the lab. So typically those in-person labs, those days can be from 6 hours to, I think my shortest day is like 3 hours, at least this term, but it really depends on your term. You could either have 2 days in person for 1 week or 3 days. It really depends. And each schedule, like each year, the schedule can differ. So yeah, it's basically just a rotating schedule. And And so for what the most rewarding part of the program is for me so far, I think to be honest, for me, it's seeing the difference in my improvement between each lab. So for each lab, we practice, like you're coming in, you're practicing over and over again the skills that you're going to need for, say, your practical exam or the career itself. And obviously, you're going to make mistakes at the start. These are things you haven't done before. You're doing them for the first time. I've already made a lot of mistakes. Um, but I think what's important is that you come in prepared to fix those mistakes and reach out to your professors and try and get help in really working on the things that you make mistakes on. So even now, like I look back on my first year and I could see how much I've grown since then and how much like the things I made mistakes on before or took me a while to do in the lab now take me no time at all, which you will find too once you come to the program. Um, and another thing that I find rewarding is not so much the program itself, but the program sets you up for this because um, your lab sections are actually pretty small. You have about like 18 to 20 people in your lab section. And it's really rewarding to be able to connect with those people. They're the same people you see bi-weekly. You see them all the time. I still have labs with the same people I had in my first year, and we're all really close and we've connected. And I did my undergrad in university, and I found it really hard to make connections with people, but I find here at Michener, it's just such a small, tight-knit community. It's really a lot easier to get to know people and it's conducive for that. So that's the rewarding part. And for any admission tips, um, I don't have too many because I believe your admission requirements are different from when I did come in, which was in 2023. Correct me if I'm wrong, Teresa. I think they don't have the Casper test anymore, right? Right, okay. So for this year, I am pretty sure you require a 70% average in your maths, English, biology, and chemistry. So it's good to remain quite above that average. I know it's the minimum average to get in is 70%, but if you want to be a competitive applicant, because we're getting a lot of people applying to the program, I would suggest that you try to keep well above the average. Um, Other than that, more of a suggestion to be prepared for the program is try to attend all of our information sessions and even the open house if you can. I think it's best to come into something new, being informative and knowing what you're getting into. Um, for example, for me, I applied pretty late, so I missed the open house, which is a shame. I wish I could have gone to it, but I made up for that by going to my orientation, which you guys should all do if you come here to go to your orientation, because they make a lot of the orientation coordinators have a lot of events that help you to see different parts of the school. I believe last year they had a scavenger hunt, and you get to see all the different laboratories where you'll be studying, where you'll be in your labs, and where you can eat lunch and things like that. And I just find it helpful to be prepared before you start something new. And finally, why I chose medical laboratory science to study. So for me, I was not sure what I wanted to do in my fourth year of undergrad. Literally in my fourth year, I had no idea. Um, but I did know I wanted to do healthcare and I wanted to work in a laboratory setting because I took lab courses as a life science student and I found those were my most enjoyable classes. And I thought, well, that's got to mean something. So I went to a career counselor at my school and he basically suggested Michener to me. So I looked into Michener because um, I also told my parents about it because my dad knew someone who was an MLT. She retired, but she was an MLT for quite a few years. And so I set up a call with her and she told me all the amazing things about the career. I told her how I was thinking of going to Michener and she told me that it was a great school and a lot of MLTs that she knew when she was working graduated from Michener. So I thought, hey, that's a good sign. Um, so she also told me how much she enjoyed the career, how flexible it was, and how rewarding it was to be able to. So basically, in certain disciplines, you get to see, so for like hematology, you will get, say you're studying a person's blood, you will get to see their blood before that's treated. So you'll be able to see the disease state. And then once they get treated, you might even get to see what their blood looks like after treatment. So once they're all better. And she said that was a rewarding thing to be able to see her impact on being able to um, not diagnose, but to suggest a diagnosis to the doctor and then be able to see the result of that. So I thought that was a good reason to join medical laboratory science. And also, she told me how much MLTs were needed. She was in MLT, I believe, during COVID, and she said the shortage was insane. And she said it was mostly the older population working as MLTs during COVID, and a lot of them now are retiring because they're tired out. So there you go, guys. We need more MLTs. You will likely get a job after your placement. That's another thing that motivated me to go here. Job security, something we all need right now. And also, it's an excellent school. Um, so that's why I chose here. I think bottom line, if you know someone who's an MLT, make an effort to reach out to them and get to know their experience and get to know the career. I think that's an asset. And I really thought that was good for me in terms of decision making. And that's ultimately why I chose to become an MLT. Thanks.
Thank you, Georgia. That was so helpful. And we're so lucky because you answered most of the questions that we always think about with this program that we hear about. And now we're going to get a chance to get to know an MLT with Nan Chow. So Nan graduated in 2022 and now works at Trillium Health Partners in the transfusion medicine department. So we're so lucky to have you to share your professional experience. Thank you.
Hi, Teresa and everyone. I'm so happy to be here and to be able to talk about my experience as an MLT. So as Teresa mentioned, I work in transfusion medicine, so I may not be able to answer questions about other departments, but I can obviously answer as much as I can regarding transfusion. In general, though, so can you describe what you typically do in a day? So in a day in transfusion or in any department really, most of the work is shift work. So what that means is you either work days, evenings, or nights. So usually when you go into your shift, you're relieving whoever's there before you. So if you're going in for day shift, you relieve the night shift. You finish up whatever work is left over and you take on whatever work comes in. That's kind of the workflow for the day. So on day shifts, the type of work that comes in is mostly specimens. So its volume is very high on days. It tapers off during evenings and then is quite low at night. Days also receives a lot of inventory, whether it's reagents or just supplies and anything you need to do your testing in general. And then you're just kind of running the lab. As whatever comes, you kind of deal with it. That's pretty much the day. So how well did Michener prepare you for the profession? Honestly, Michener, I think, prepared us pretty well, especially in terms of theory. We were very well prepared for the exams and the CSMLS if you study well. There are some people who kind of you may want to push a lot of work back, but honestly, Michener kind of the way the workload comes, it's kind of really scary. You're already behind after day one, and it's like if you don't keep up, it's like really hard to catch up. So I encourage anyone and everyone who goes to Michener to kind of stay on top of the work. Don't let it scare you, but you'll make it through, and it really is helpful. In terms of the SimClin, so at the end of Michener, after your 1.5 years ish, you kind of go into a summer synthon, which is kind of like a simulated clinicals. So this prepares you for your hospital clinicals. It's going to give you kind of the final hands-on experience and kind of ties together your theory so that when you go into the hospital to practice as a student, you know what you're doing and why you're doing certain things. So that was very, very helpful. And then once you go into your hospital placements, it makes even more sense. For example, me, hematology in Michener was kind of textbook heavy, and it didn't really make too much sense until I went into placement and did a lot of the manual testing. And then it kind of all clicked, and I liked hematology a lot more. Like in school, it kind of drags because you have to memorize so many things. But in the hospital, it kind of clicks. And I'm like, oh, this is why I'm doing that. Now this makes sense. Like you kind of go, everything just, I don't know, makes sense afterwards. What else? What was your experience like when trying to find a job after graduation? After graduating, honestly, before graduating, people are coming to you. When I say people, I mean managers and seniors even. They come to you and they ask you to apply for the department. So I kind of skipped this part, but basically in the hospital, there's 5 main departments for MLTs to work in. It's either chemistry, hematology, microbiology, pathology, or transfusion medicine. So depending on where you are during your placement, you'll likely have a hiring manager or someone who's interested in you joining their workforce approaching you and asking you to apply, which may seem kind of intimidating, but it's also like very comforting to know that there's positions everywhere. Every single department kind of asks you to join them. Most students after graduating will find a part-time or a casual job at either their placement hospital, if that is where they want to be, or somewhere else. There is no shortage of jobs. If you're lucky enough, you might even get a full-time job, honestly. Like our manager has full-time openings, part-time openings, and it's very, very easy to find a job as long as you are willing to apply and put in the effort. So how can an MLT work in different disciplines of MedLab? So as I mentioned, there's 5 different disciplines. Each one is a little different in their own way, but overall, Michener prepares you for all of them very well, I would say. Because I work in transfusion medicine, I can't say exactly whether Michener prepared me for the branches of the other departments, but in terms of transfusion, I think I was quite prepared theory-wise. I don't know if I answered everything.
No, thank you so much. You are so honest, and that's what we need both from you and Georgia, just like giving us the authentic, the real life experience. That last question really is more because of the 5 disciplines that you're studying.
Yeah.
Do you just and then you have the hiring managers coming to you and say, come work in my department. But when do you decide as an MLT? Because I've spoken to other alumni that have said, oh, I'm now in this field in like biochemistry. So do you decide that because of the job offer, or is it more like, oh, I really prefer this one and I'm more comfortable in this one, so I'm going to look for these kind of jobs in this discipline?
So I've heard from both scenarios. I know people who applied, this is let's say 5 years ago, where you're in a position where you're kind of worried that you may not get a job. So they apply and accept a position in a department because the department they want there's no posting. So let's say, for example, you really want to work in microbiology, but as a student, like while you're a student there, the whole 5 months, there's no posting, no openings. And then now there's an opening in hematology. So then the manager encourages you to apply, you get an interview, and they're offering you the job. You're still waiting on micro. You don't hear anything. So there are people who have taken that like second choice because they don't hear anything from the first choice, which is totally fine. Like they are in a good place as well. But there's also people who apply to the department they want whenever they find out which department they want to be in, right? I didn't know I wanted to be in transfusion until my placements, because at Michener, they teach you the basics of transfusion. You learn about derivatives and blood products, but really you don't know what they are until you physically see them and handle them. It didn't make sense on the lecture slides, like what half of the products are to me, because I'm a visual learner and tactile learner. So I need to kind of manipulate the stuff I'm working with and see so I can associate descriptions to products. So when I was actually in placement is when I realized I really like transfusion and I like the idea of it and working with different products. That's when I decided I wanted to be in transfusion. So as a student, you'll figure out either during Michener, like in the theory, you'll figure you really love the theory and kind of go with it, or you'll figure it out during placement. And whichever direction you go is perfectly fine. Like you'll always get kind of encouraged to apply to certain departments, but don't feel pressured to apply if you're not interested, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. Thank you, Nan. Yeah, no, that makes sense, because this is the kind of stuff we can't read on a website. So
Yeah.
it's important that we hear from somebody working in the field. Thank you both for sharing and answering those questions. We will now open it up to you guys to type in your questions for Georgia and Nan. We do have a specific one about the physical requirements needed when you work on the job. Nan, is there a lot of standing or sitting a lot, heavy lifting?
This depends on which department you're in. So in TM, there's a lot of walking around and standing. Sitting is also a decent part, but maybe I'd say 30%, depending on which bench you're on too. So there's different duties in transfusion. So for example, if I am on a bench where I'm issuing products out to the floors continuously, I'm most likely sitting. If I'm on a bench where I'm receiving inventory, taking QC of the fridges, like I'm probably walking around. Do you know what I mean? And then even the department, like I said, matters. So pathology, there's a lot of sitting, because as Georgia might know, there's a lot of embedding, cutting, grossing, all of that you do sitting. You'll learn those terms if you go into Michener, but basically it depends on which department you're in, I'd say. It's hard to. And heavy lifting, there's you're never asked to do anything you are uncomfortable and unable to do. There's always some sort of machine or even staff to help you. So in TM, we have like this lift, which helps us lift heavy containers of 10-liter saline if needed. So it's kind of like you just push the saline on and then you press a button and it lifts it all the way up. So it kind of, there's things to help you out. Yeah, that's
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to move on to another question. It's mostly both of your undergrads. Maybe Georgia, you could start. Would you guys like to share what your undergrads were, or if you had an undergrad when you applied for the program?
Yeah. So Georgia mentioned, sorry, that she was in life science. I was also in life science. Yeah, same thing.
So with life science, is there like a specific, or was there like biology, you know?
Some people specialize, some people don't. I personally didn't specialize, so
yeah, I was in general biology, life science.
Yeah. But in no way do you need a undergrad to apply to the program. So just
and we heard from both of you, like there's a lot of theory and make sure you stay on top of it, but it all pays off because of the clinical, everything is, yes, this is the reason why we read all that stuff, because we're applying our knowledge. In hospitals, and Georgia, I know you'll go into your clinical soon, but also for Nan, are there positions in the hospitals where you can rotate between a few disciplines or departments?
Yes. So as an MLT, if you really like multiple departments, you can find a hospital that has a core lab. So what that means is they usually have hematology and chemistry tacked together. So you work the two. Some even have transfusion. So in the past, it's very, very common to work in a hospital that has all three departments like together. So you'd be a core lab tech. So you'd work heme chem, and transfusion. Nowadays, transfusion tends to be branched off because it's quite heavy sometimes, and not everyone likes transfusion because it's a very it's more stressful compared to the other environments or departments because of the way the demand is. By that I mean like when there's a patient that's actively bleeding, the department that reacts is transfusion. You get calls for emergency products, and to some people that sounds really scary, so they kind of don't like the department. But there is definitely ways for you to work in a hospital with multiple departments, or like you're working in a bit of each. The only thing I don't know about is micro and pathology. They're usually separate.
Thank you. So both of you had undergrads, and I mean, maybe we could all answer this question, but would you recommend starting the program straight from high school, or will the information course load be too much? I'll start, and then I'll let you two experts kind of add anything. It is meant to be direct entry because in the 3 years, we're going to teach you everything you need to know about this to be a successful MLT, but Georgia and Nan would have, better authentic experience to support that.
So while I entered from undergrad, I have quite a few friends in the program actually who came in straight from high school. They obviously had a transition period, as all people do. I had a transition period from high school to my undergrad. It's just something that usually happens. They like the program. They've when they struggle, they reach out for help. We all work together, and we're on each other's team. So if anybody needs help, we sort of have we understand other people come from different I don't want to say backgrounds, it's not the right word, but like from different circumstances. So for some people, certain things are going to be harder to get used to than others. So I always try to understand my friends who come from high school who maybe take a little bit longer to I guess understand things at first. But I do think it's something you can do. It's meant, as Teresa said, for direct entry. It's just the program is something you really have to work hard on and focus on, just like any like your undergraduate degree if you had one. I had to really work hard for that too. It's just when you're in, I feel like healthcare programs generally have quite a heavy workload wherever you go. So it's obviously going to take something to get used to. It took me a while to get used to this program actually from my undergrad, which I didn't expect at first, but Michener can be a bit tricky sometimes. But once you get into the workflow, I think you develop your own strategies on how to tackle things and study for tests. And I feel like you just get used to it after a while. So it's definitely doable.
Thank you, Georgia. Nan, my question for you is about working. What would you recommend if someone doesn't want to stay in one discipline for too long, like in fear that if they apply somewhere else, they won't have the experience needed in a different department?
I don't think that it's frowned upon to jump departments. Again, it depends on the environment of your hospital and the team you're with, and I guess the managers, like if they talk to each other and they like really want to keep you somewhere. It's hard to say because it's really dependent on your environment. But I've seen people change departments. It's not like it doesn't happen. People jump departments after 5 years, 10 years if they're bored of one. So like pathology, for example, is a department where a lot of people tend to go near the end of the MLT period, their MLT career, sorry, because in pathology, you don't work that many off shifts, which means you don't work nights. There's no nights in pathology, and you get like holidays off and weekends off. So it's kind of like the dream job, and you're sitting a lot, you know what I mean? So it's not like you can't jump between departments. You definitely, if you're working 5 years in one department and you want to switch, you definitely would have to restudy the material a little bit, because if you're going to apply and get interviewed, you're going to be asked technical and theory questions. If you can't answer it, it might be a little tricky to get the job, but it's not impossible. Like once you have your diploma, then you are an MLT, you can work in all 5 departments. That's the expectation.
are you working alone as the only MLT if you're on a night shift?
Yes. So most in transfusion, hematology, um, micro, I'm not sure because I don't like the micros in a different hospital site, so I don't see them. But transfusion, hematology, you are alone on nights. Sometimes you can help each other because you may be cross-trained. So a lot of my hematology um, and transfusion staff or friends are kind of, they can work the other department, but most hospitals are kind of migrating away from that, like they want to departmentalize and have people only in TM to stay in TM and people in hematology to work hematology. So there's kind of less and less staff being able to work both departments. So yeah, you will be alone.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you know this, but I know that I'm sure if you look at current job postings right now, we have a question here about average starting pay for entry level MLT. I know it could differ, but do you have an answer for that? Or
Yeah,
I mean,
so at Trillium, it's, I don't know the exact number to the cent, but it's around 35 hourly.
so this is like entry level.
Entry level, yes. So when I started, I started 2022 January as a full MLT, and I was getting 32 something, but that was before I got my license. So this was before me writing the exam and being like a full-fledged MLT. So what a lot of managers like to do is they'll hire you before you write your exam, before you pass your exam, and then they'll give you work to do that, and like that an MLA or a technician can do. So you kind of you start your training and you ease into it, and then you wait for your exam results. After you get your exam results, then your pay bumps up towards to the lower end of MLT. Whereas when you're working before you get your license, you're working as like max MLA or technician pay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a big difference with MLA and the program we have at Michener is for technologists. So just to show the difference. And you know, that was when Nan, and thank you for sharing that. Very
Yes,
you know, like thank you for telling us your salary. But I mean, every year we know pay is gonna go up, right?
Yeah.
So that's just the reality of it. There's a question here. I'm gonna end it with the last two questions. Salary of an MLT, whether it will cover the rental living costs in Toronto. I think I'm just gonna take this. So Nan kind of talked about it. It really depends, again, if you're starting and then as you progress, of course, it will go up. And it, you know, rental and living costs, I mean, like which part of Toronto? It's hard to answer that because I mean, different parts of Toronto have different costs. So I think if you're looking at job postings, you will see you know what the expected salary is. But for an entry level, like for you prospective applicants, it's good to know like, okay, this is where I'm going to start, and it can only go up by the time I graduate and by the time I'll work. So and is there a way to shadow or volunteer in a MedLab as someone who is not an MLT?
I don't think so. I think you need to be a student of some sort, like a student of some sort, because I haven't seen any volunteers come through. I haven't heard of any opportunities for volunteers come through because the way the lab works, it's how do I say this? We're very busy. It's like to train and to take students takes time away from our work, like our patient care already. So it's kind of difficult to have a volunteer come in where we need to kind of show you what to do as well, because we have students majority of the year. And then when we don't have students, we have new hires. So there's like hardly any downtime where we're sitting around and wondering if anyone wants to volunteer. And it's also not a completely safe environment because you're working with real samples and you're working with real machines and things are biohazardous. So it's not recommended unless certain things are checked off, you know?
Thank you. This will be the last question of the evening. And Georgia, this is for you. Do we learn venipuncture in school? And if yes, how often do MLTs actually do it? Because my assumption is that this is usually an MLA job.
Okay, so yes, we do learn venipuncture in school. I did it in my first year. It's just one semester. And you practice on dummies first, and then you eventually progress to working on your fellow lab mates. How often you do it as an MLT? I believe that MLTs do it a lot more in the rural hospitals because there's less employees there and you have to take on more diverse positions. I don't know if Nian knows about that more, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah, so Georgia's pretty spot on. So if you're working at a very small community hospital that's kind of remote, chances are you may be asked to take on that task because you have less, the hospital in general has less staff. So there's less people doing the work, so you need to do more. If you're working in a large hospital in the city, you may, because specimen and sample volume is higher, you're kind of doing a little bit less because you do more in each department, or not department, sorry, in each like skill. You do more in each skill or each thing. But we have MLAs to collect the blood samples at Trillium. So I never do venipuncture at all, but we were taught it in school. Teresa, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you for that. Wraps up the Q&A for that section. Thank you for sharing your experience. We're just going to, any admission requirements question. We do have the webinar that was last week, and the recording will be up sometime this week on our website. You can also email admissions, call, or drop in on Fridays on Zoom 1 to 2 for specific questions about the program and the admission requirements. We're also just remind you that there's 6 other webinars coming up on the series. So we thank you for attending today. And again, this will be recorded if you had to leave early or would like to share it with someone else. And if you are really interested now after hearing from Georgia and Nan, we're going to have our open house on November 23rd. So in less than 3 weeks, we're finally opening up our doors again since 2019 and welcoming you on campus from 10 to 2. So if you'd like to see the lab and see all the different disciplines and how it works, faculty, students, and alum will be there too to kind of show you what the class looks like and what campus looks like. So we really appreciate your time in coming tonight. And for Georgia and Nan, thank you for sharing your very authentic experience. We've never had an alum and student have this much time to share their thoughts and their experience in the program. So we are so grateful. Thank you so much. And everyone, you have a good evening and have a good rest of the week.